I'll share that. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I have the handout pulled up here. So organizing your projects page. Our goal for today is to learn how to identify some of the ways you can improve your projects page so that it can become more of a command center for you that you feel very confident using in Dubsado, and less of a organized or disorganized chaos. I want to talk through some strategies for cleaning up your projects. If you are, feeling that you're a little behind in the organization, I'm going to talk through some ways you can, get kind of caught up with that. And I'm also talking about strategies for staying better organized in the future that will hopefully, once you implement them, take less of your time to actually keep those projects organized so that it doesn't have to be a yearly thing, cleaning out the projects page. As usual, I have a couple of additional resources in the handout here for you. And these situations with SAM webinars are not necessarily, straight beginner webinars. I do cover these larger topics that kind of rely on you having some prior knowledge to begin with. So it will really help you to, when it comes to organizing your projects, to of course be familiar with what projects are and how they are used, to have some familiarity with project statuses and tags, although I will be talking about a few examples there. And also workflows. So it turns out workflows are a big part of keeping things organized. And I'll share some tips for those of you not quite ready for workflows yet. But if you have workflows, wow, you can really set up some cool things to keep your account organized all by itself. So I have some links here, especially on project statuses and tags. I'm linking to one of Cameron's excellent FAQ&A webinars for a full rundown on that. So be sure to check it out. We don't need much for organizing projects, but an outline of your services and what your client process is will actually help you quite a bit. That will start to make sense as we dive in. And you'll also need a bit of time set aside for cleaning up the projects. So as I said at the beginning, organizing your back end, organizing your information is, of course, not always going to be a major priority when you have clients that you're dealing with, projects that need your attention right now. So we understand that, that's just part of running a business. But the longer you sort of go, where you allow the projects to kind of get out of hand and stay unorganized, and at first you sort of deal with it, and then it starts to get more and more cluttered, it's just going to take you more time in the long run to sort of unravel things. So if you can set a bit of time aside, especially, just before the new year, as the new year starts, that will be a really great way to get those projects organized and, have you feeling ready for the new projects that come in next year. Now we're going to jump more into actually wrangling in your projects page and how to get organized if you are not organized already. So I do want to quickly jump over to my sample account here, and I put in a bunch of example projects. So we can see there's a lot going on here. Oh my goodness, so many different projects. They're not all looking organized. They're kind of all in the leads area, but we have a couple jobs spread out. So it's really not looking like a place where I can come and feel that I'm getting a good, big picture view of what is going on with my clients and projects and how that's going. So I've written out kind of some steps here for you to follow when it comes to looking at your projects page. And, sometimes the hardest part is just where to start first, how to start tackling it. So we want to, kind of get over that hump. So the first step is going to simply be to identify what is not working for you on the projects page. I've heard some folks come to me and say, all of my projects are stuck in leads. I can't tell who's, a lead and who's actually become a job. Or, I am just not seeing the right information that I want to see on the projects page when I get there. So to help you, just identify what the problem is, that will, of course, help you find the right solution for it. Down past the instructions in the handout, I've put together a little table of some troubleshooting tips for you. So you can, kind of look at what challenge you're having and the solution we recommend. So I'll be, talking about some of these things as we go through the steps above. So the first step is just kind of identifying what's not going right. Number one, when I look at this account, I'm not seeing, any sort of consistency in the titling, and that visually kind of bothers me and makes me feel unorganized. So that would be an important thing to tackle. I also feel like I really want to see my clients' company names, and I'm not seeing those. So I want to see if I can work that out. And of course, I'm also finding that I got behind on changing the statuses of my projects over time. So a bunch of them got stuck in the lead status, but some of them I'm already working with. So, those are kind of the main issues I'm identifying here, and you might find similar or different issues in your own account. All right, so the first step that we want to go through is just archiving any completed projects and cold leads. So the first thing that can really happen if you've let the projects page, kind of go unorganized for a while, is that you might build up some projects that are no longer moving forward, or you've already completed, and they're sort of clogging up the pipeline and clogging up your overall view. So a great first step is to go through and archive those projects. The reason I recommend archiving the projects is that you'll still have them in case you ever want to go back and reopen them up, in the case of a cold lead, for instance. And you'll still have all the information if it was a completed project. So if that client comes back and has a question later on, you can still find their project in the archive status right here, or by searching for their project in the search bar, or going through their client profile in the address book. So it helps you retain all the information. You would really only want to delete a project if you created it by accident, it's a duplicate, you really no longer need the project. That's the only time I would delete one. And one more thing to be considerate of as you're archiving projects is that if the project is a lead, at the time you go to archive that project, the invoice is going to be deleted. So that could be good news for you if you're using something like a public proposal and some blank invoices are getting generated that aren't being paid. Of course, that's good news because we're clearing out those invoices that will not ultimately be paid if they're cold leads who aren't going to follow through. But if it is someone who, kind of made it through most of the onboarding, maybe they did part of the proposal process and then needed to back out, you want to retain that information. You're going to want to change their project status to any job status first. And then once you do that, you can archive the project after it's been designated as a job, and the invoice will remain on the project. So just a tip there as you're archiving. And if you would like to archive projects one by one, you can do so on the right side of the page under the Actions column. You can simply click the drop down under Actions and select Archive. And the pop-up here will give you a little warning and ask you to confirm. Alternatively, you can archive a project from inside of the project. So inside the project from the little drop down here, you can click archive the project that way. That's great if you need to sort of review them more one by one. But if you have a lot of projects to go through and you're able to easily identify which ones should be archived, you can just go right through and start checking these boxes down the left-hand side. These are our bulk action check boxes. So once you check a few, it's kind of like clearing out your email inbox. You can come up to this little drop down here and select archive, and you'll be able to archive all those projects you selected at once. So that is going to be a quick and easy way to kind of get through your projects and archive the ones that are no longer needed in the active area. All right, so after you clear out those projects that are no longer needed on the day-to-day, I encourage you to review your project statuses and make adjustments on the customize page if you feel you need to, do so. So again, at the beginning of the webinar, we went through a bunch of different examples of how you can use project statuses. So maybe just for right now, you're just starting out and you don't have all of these statuses. You just have all leads and all jobs. And that is completely fine as you're starting out. You may just, not have as many clients, still figuring out your process. You can absolutely just use leads and jobs and simply change the status. That is what this no status means right here under job and under lead. It means it's uncategorized, essentially. It's not falling under one of your custom statuses. It's going into, just kind of the general group. So it puts them in that all category. So you can absolutely just, start moving projects from lead to job with no other additional statuses. Or maybe it's time for you to start, kind of making that more robust, matching your process, overall the steps in your process. And now would be a good time to start identifying those steps. When you're ready to create some project statuses, or if you need to change up some of the project statuses you have, you can do that from the projects page over on the right hand side where it says customize. And right up here at the top is where you can edit and adjust those project statuses. So all you need to do is click add status at the top to create a new status, let it know if it's a lead or a job. You can reorganize project statuses by dragging and dropping them. And one of my favorite things is that you can actually set a default project status that will be open when you click on the projects page. So I recommend choosing a project status to be your default, whichever status is the one that needs your attention the most. So if you are a coach or a consultant and you're constantly fielding new inquiries, you might set your new inquiries status as the default just by checking the box there. If you are, more project-based, photographer, event, one of those kind of categories, you might want to choose your most active sort of to-do status under jobs. So maybe one's coming up this week, for example. And you also have the ability just to, select all leads or all jobs, however you would like to view it. So setting your, default view settings is another part of staying organized, making sure you don't have to click too many times to find what you're looking for on the most frequent basis. So we've reset our custom or our default project status there. I'll go back to the projects page. Great. And one more thing about the project statuses, if you do already have project statuses and you maybe identified they're not quite working the way you want, I would go back, of course, to look at your process. I would also look to see, do you have too many statuses where you're having to, expand and scroll through many statuses? You might be trying to keep track of too many milestones, in which case it's probably time to decide which ones are the most important and how you can kind of reabsorb the other ones. On the flip side, maybe you don't have enough statuses, so things are falling through the cracks. Maybe it's not enough for you to just keep track of who you sent proposals to and then see on the other side who's paying deposits. Maybe clients really get stuck on your contract and you need to add that as a separate status all on its own so you can keep track of those steps individually. So just kind of take stock of how statuses are working for you and make some decisions from there. I should mention too, since I didn't at the beginning of the webinar, if you're coming up with any questions or you have, a more industry specific question that you're having trouble, coming up with maybe some status examples, feel free to, write a comment either in Big Marker or in the Facebook Live post, and I will absolutely cover that at the end of the webinar. So please do reach out with your questions. All right, so once you get the statuses more in line with what you're looking for, you'll want to actually go through and update the statuses of your projects to align with that. So in our case here, our example, we got a bunch of projects just stuck at the leads phase. We weren't keeping them, up to date. So as I showed briefly before, you can always change a project status from this drop down right here and just select a brand new one. So that's good if you have to really kind of take your time and review projects. Of course, the project status can be changed and reviewed from inside the project as well. So you have that option there. But just like archiving projects, this part of the process can go very quickly if you're able to use that bulk action checklist again. So we could, just identify a few of the projects that are actually coming up this week. Obviously, this is some sample data, so I'm not paying very close attention to the dates I put in, but for the sake of example, let's say that these projects I know I'm still working on this week. I can select those and choose update project status from our bulk action dropdown right here. And it will let me choose where I'd like to send those projects and update the status. Yeehaw, there we go. So now those projects will be in the this week status. So now when I come to the projects page, this is my default status. It opens up to the projects I'm working on this week, and I can give those my attention first and not be distracted by a full list of every project I have, in my account. So that is a very crucial thing, something I see coming up a lot, just project statuses not being up to date. And I'll talk about why that is a little bit later on. Let's talk about some project tags as well. So now we're getting into a little bit more of the cherry on top, those little extra details you can add in when organizing your projects to take things to the next level. So project statuses are best for keeping track of where your project is at in your overall process over time. So statuses are anything that changes over time as the project progresses. Project tags, on the other hand, are used for helping you categorize your projects. What type of project is it that you're working with? So those tags can be seen when you're looking at the projects page. Let's see if we have, I think I may have archived the only one with a tag, but let's pull one up here. Looks like this is a branding consulting project, and it doesn't have any tags on it. And I have a few example tags created, but I can create a new tag for my consulting projects. And when you create tags, you are again looking at what types of projects you have. So most often that's going to come down to, what services you offer. In this example here of Dub Design Co., it looks like I offer some consulting services, logo design, and website design. So those would be the tags I create to represent the different services I have. You can have more than one tag per project. So maybe if you're a photographer and you work with both local and remote clients that you travel to, you can have a tag for local and a tag for remote. I've even seen folks use tags in a really cool way to keep track of why they may have lost a lead at a point in the process. Tags for things like too expensive, date wasn't available, timeline didn't work out, any of those reasons that clients may have to move on to a different service provider. I've seen folks create tags for those different reasons and apply them to a project before archiving. Here's the reason that's cool. From the projects page, when you're adding tags to your projects, you can actually filter by first status and then by tag. So I can go into all of my leads, and then I can click this filter button right here, and I can filter by tags. So if I want to bring up all of my leads that are consulting projects, I can click that and it will filter for me. And once you filter your projects, you can actually export a CSV of the current view. So this can be a really helpful way to help you, just kind of generate some reports on a maybe monthly or quarterly basis. And same thing with the example of those archived projects. You can click on the archived status and do the same thing. So if you were to create those tags for reasons why you are archiving a project, you can still go through and filter using those reasons and find all of the projects with that tag and export a CSV. So some really cool opportunities there for creating tags. And we showed you how you can create a tag within a project in the project sidebar. If you go to the customize button and down at the bottom, you can actually create those tags from scratch here. So I recommend kind of thinking about the different categories of tags you would make. Maybe it's just the type of project based on the service. Maybe you want to tag by package. Maybe that local remote makes sense, or the archiving reasons. Think about the different categories of tags you want to make, and then you can set them up here. And then the next part of that step would be, of course, tagging existing projects. So unfortunately, unlike changing the project status and archiving projects, tagging is going to be done on each project individually. You are not able to tag a project from the projects page at this time. So you would have to click on the project to open it up and then enter the tag here. Oops, I create a new tag. There we go. Of course, you can choose the color as well. So that is going to be a project by project thing. So if you have a lot of projects, you might have to decide, time versus benefit. If you really want to run those reports, it might help you to tag the projects. If you just want to get tags on the ones you're working on currently, you can do that. Or if you just have too many projects for this to make sense for you, you can start tagging projects going forward and just start collecting that information starting now instead of going back and tagging all of the old projects. And finally, one last tip as part of this would be cleaning up your project titles if needed and if you would like. So this is another kind of optional step that is a little bit more time consuming because it does need to be done on a project by project basis, opening the project and clicking on the project title at the top to change it. But it can be very beneficial. So something we like to recommend is coming up with a project title convention. So a similar pattern of naming your projects, obviously swapping out the correct information each time, but having a standardized pattern is going to make the projects much nicer and more pleasant to scan through. Even just these 3 projects here doesn't look so great. We have one called logo design for Reichert Rats. Interesting name generator I used to get these today. We have one just called logo in all capital letters, and we have another that's titled with the client's name. So not going to be terribly useful or helpful for us as we kind of look through here. So one thing you can do is just decide on a naming convention that makes sense for you and gives you the context you want. The wedding industry, I'm usually seeing a naming convention that has the client's first names, the couple's first names, and their wedding date. Oftentimes, photographers might use the type of shoot in the title as well. Even if you're tagging, they might name a project with Smith family photo shoot, or Jones wedding, something of that nature. So you're kind of getting some information about the client and also the work you're doing for them. In general, of course, the rule of thumb would be titling projects more or less what you are doing for the client. So that's going to make the most sense. For coaches and consultants, sometimes it does make sense to use the client's name as the project title, but you may also want to include just maybe the package of consulting that they're on. So that maybe Barbara is doing a 6-week coaching package, and you can see that from the title. So whatever you come up with, just make sure that you can standardize it and that it will have the information inside that will be helpful for you to search for the project. Of course, we can visually find the project. You can sort by the title, alphabetically here in the list. And you can also search projects with that title. So if I just search logo, you can see that we have a couple projects with the same name. Not always necessarily the most helpful, even though we can see the client's name as well. So just some tips on the project titling. And again, same thing as the tags. You might decide just to start using it going forward, retitling your current projects and leaving the old ones behind, or maybe retitling everything if you are very invested in that. Lastly, one more tip, once you've kind of gotten those organizing tasks out of the way, back on the customize page, I just want to show you one more thing you can customize about the view of your projects. Talked about having that default project status. Well, we can also choose which columns we want to see for our projects. So you'll just click Edit Column on the right-hand side, and then you can turn on or off these different options for the columns. So maybe I do really want to see the company name. You can also show the created date of the project if that's important for you to see, as well as the project source if you're using those project sources. You can change a default sorting view as well, so how you'd like those projects to be sorted by default. We have some options here. And you can also show any columns for custom project mapped fields as well. Not the client mapped fields, but the project map fields you could show. So with company turned on, back over here, I'll click Save. And back on the projects page, now we can see a column with the company name. So that might be helpful if you do more business-to-business work. All right, so that's everything about getting organized up front. I also want to talk about how to stay organized going forward. Because of course, as I mentioned, we don't want to go through all of this organizing and then have to just repeat it every 6 months or every year. So just a couple of quick tips for you for staying organized going forward. When it comes to project statuses, one of the biggest misconceptions I see is that projects will change status automatically on their own. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Dubsado does not actually know how you want your projects to move through just based on how you name the statuses. So you do have to have the project status change in one of two ways. So the first way is manual. So if you're not using workflows yet, you're still getting the hang of Dubsado, still using it manually, you can absolutely still use project statuses and they can still be really helpful for you. So to do that, that's just the same process we talked about before of changing the project status. You just want to make that a habit when you go into work in Dubsado that you're going to be updating the statuses of your projects. So just kind of write that into your habit and list of things that you'll do when you come into work with those projects in Dubsado. The other option is to build project status changes into a workflow. And that is ultimately going to be the most sustainable and easy way to keep your projects up to date. I honestly believe it is one of the biggest game changers you can make in your workflows to just really tighten up the account and make it feel up to date and make this projects page really feel like a command center. So inside of a workflow, for instance, here, just looking at like a simple workflow that sends out a proposal, what we could do is after a proposal gets sent, so with our send form action, I can add an action to change the project status, and we can choose appropriately proposal sent, and I can add that in. So now this runs immediately after the proposal has been sent to the client. So this is a very easy thing to implement in your workflows. In fact, you may want to use your workflows as inspiration for building out your project statuses, since you'll be building those status changes right into the workflow. So that's a really easy thing to do. Just keep note that this will be for new projects going forward. It's not going to automatically affect any projects with current workflows. So I would recommend just finishing those out manually, changing the project status, and then gradually transitioning into that automated status change version. For project tags, my tips here are just to make sure that you're not using too many tags overall. I would try to stick to no more than 3 to 4 sort of categories of tags like we talked about. That way it doesn't become unruly to apply the tags. And then of course, we also have a add a tag action that you can put into the workflow. So this is especially great if you have one of those workflow elements on your lead capture form, the drop down that starts a different workflow based on what the client selects. In all of those different workflows, assuming they're related to your different services, just pop in right at the top of the workflow. You can add an action to add tag, and you can choose the tag that aligns with the workflow that you're in, and just drag that up to the top of the workflow. So as soon as it gets applied, as soon as the project's coming into Dubsado, it's already getting that tag applied. So that is going to help you tremendously when you're reviewing your new leads, just to be able to see what is coming in overall. All right, with project titles, I think the biggest thing that can help you here, besides obviously having that naming convention, is to set a default project title in the settings of any of the forms people are using to come into Dubsado. So those would be your lead captures or your public proposals. So inside of the settings of both public proposals and lead capture forms, right in the settings here, you have the ability to set a default title for the new projects being created. So it'll be under this lead title heading here. And let me just refresh the page here. Sometimes we don't see our little client drop down showing up. So for this lead title, we can put in, something like, and it becomes a little bit difficult when you have multiple services all flowing in from the same lead capture form. So you may just have to, work with just some basic information for the lead title, or you may need to do like the client's name, which you can actually put in a smart field for that, and then be, kind of renaming the title after the fact. Once you learn more about what they want to do, you could pop in a to-do and do your workflow, reminding you to update that project title. Otherwise, if it's for something like a wedding, and normally we have a drop down here that is showing the ability to select the client's first name. Let me see if I can get that to appear. Sometimes it's a little shy. There it is. Saving the form and reopening can help. So right in here, that client drop down, let's say we wanted to set up a title that shows the client's first names, maybe for the wedding industry. So we could put in the first name. And of course, you would need these both being collected in mapped fields on the lead capture form itself. We could also pull in the alternate contact first name for the two first names of the couple. And all of your projects that get created would have this information inside. So this is where you can start kind of bringing projects in, having similar titles. That is a great way to do that. And finally, when it comes to archiving projects, it's more of a habit thing. So you might want to set a reminder on your calendar just to manually archive those cold leads every 1 or 2 weeks, whichever will work for you. But you can also add an archive project action into your workflows. So you could experiment with adding that type of action as part of your onboarding workflow steps. Maybe if a client does not complete a questionnaire within 3 days, you want to consider them, kind of cold and not moving forward, you could, add in that archive action. And also a good idea to add the archive project action in as the very last step of your workflow after everything has been delivered to the client, after all of the any follow-up emails have gone out, make it the very, very last action to archive the project. That will help keep things moving through automatically if you have those workflows going. All right, so that is everything on getting your projects page organized. It can be a little bit of a daunting task, but hopefully breaking it down into these steps helps to give you some ideas of how you could actually tackle this if it's something you're facing in your business.